Google's finally doing what every AI giant should have done from day one, showing how they'll make money. At Input-Output Conference, Google didn't just flex its Gemini model. It laid out real plans to charge for AI infrastructure and advanced tools. While others throw billions into scaling, Google's actually talking returns. Maybe this time, the hype comes with a business model. Watch the full video, because Google's AI play might be the first one that actually makes dollars and cents.
And segueing into thing number 4, Gary, we are talking about Google. They recently had one of their annual conferences. They call it the I/O, which stands for Input Output Conference. And you mentioned it in our prior thing just about this AI, but what's the business model to actually earn a return on these massive investments that these tech companies are making into the AI space? So Gary, thing number 4, you're going to get us all caught up to speed as Google pushes forward with AI at I/O, again, their input-output conference.
So, Rob, when Google first released Gemini, it led to a huge amount of controversy and all kinds of problems. The model had a lot of difficulty dealing with racial issues. These are not things that we're going to be discussing here on the 5 things. We focus on finance, the markets, the economy. I don't want to dive into those kinds of controversial social and political issues. But all I can tell you is the model wasn't effective, and people found all kinds of funny and obnoxious and frightening ways to get the model to spit out horrendous results. So they've been working on it now, and from what I'm reading, they're making slow progress at making it better, and that's okay as long as it's heading in the right direction. The thing that I think is really interesting about Google's announcement, it's not so much that Gemini is so much better than it was a few months ago. It's that they talked a lot about new investments into software with the ability to monetize it. They're focusing on charging for AI infrastructure, charging for advanced capabilities. They talked about new investments in hardware ranging from smartphones to smart glasses. Google is one of those few companies like Apple that can make hardware and software. And so, one of the things that we talked about all last year and the first quarter and a half of this year is that these AI hyperscalers, again, some of them were spending hundreds of billions of dollars and had no plan for how they were going to earn a return on it. This I/O conference showed positive strategic signals in terms of AI advancement and monetization capacity. So, the market is a little skeptical of that, but it's actually a little bit of a relief to see that some of these companies are trying to figure out how do we make money from this. Now, I don't think Google's model, their Gemini model, is anywhere close to the best, but I do think it's smart that they're starting to think about how do we earn a return on all of these, NVIDIA chips. So that I viewed as a positive from the conference.
Gary, with the monetization of these AI investment, is there any reason that for Google in particular, it might be more important just in terms of them looking at ways to monetize and obviously recoup that capital expenditure back to investors?
Absolutely, Rob. That's the right question to be asking. For Google, this is crucial. So Google makes a ton of money from their search business where they have something like 90% share. And, they're constantly, including right now, facing all kinds of antitrust suits because they really do have a monopoly and they use it in ways to ensure that they benefit, often at the expense of others, thus getting a lot of attention from antitrust regulators in both Europe and the US. Um, and the reason AI is such a threat to them is let's go back 5 years, Rob, and say you wanted to search for something, you wanted information. So you would go to probably Google, 90% of people do, and you put in your question or what you wanted more information on, and then Google would say, okay, well, here are some sponsored answers, and here are answers from people who have paid us, and the more they paid us, the higher it'll be. And then you scroll down a little bit, and you'll get the answers that come from Google's SEO models, right? And what their search engine thinks. And then, you would pick 1 or 2 or 10 links that you thought would be useful, and you clicked through and started reading to find the answer. Okay, well, for anything basic right now, what do? You go to one of the AI models, you go to ChatGPT, or I particularly like Grok on X, you ask the question, and instead of saying, here are a bunch of web pages that might have the answer you're looking for, what do? They say, here's the answer, and you don't need Google. And so, there's a bit of a scare a couple weeks ago when Apple said that Google search volume was declining on iPhones for the first time ever. And the reason for that very clearly is because people are going to the AI models to get the answers directly. And the more people go directly to AI to get answers to their questions rather than a link which may contain the answer to the question, that is a huge threat to Google's cash cow, their search business. So Google needs to, everybody's trying to get this right, but for Google, they need to get it right in a way that everybody else wants to, but doesn't necessarily need to.
Yeah, it's been something that we've been spending a ton of time on our side, Gary, is like what's changing in terms of search. And you're exactly right. You look at Google and it's more of a finite 0 to 1, right? I search, I click, and if I get the answer, great, I'm done. And that's the goal. Chat GPT on the other side, Perplexity, we're calling it over at Flying V multi-turn conversations, right? So it's not just that individual search, it's probably 5 searches or 10 prompts or searches or whatever we want to call it, right? And so I don't know how they're calculating, obviously, this search volume, but if you're just taking it, as a whole, right, it's like, okay, well, if it takes me one search on Google to get the answer, but then it's 10 queries or 10 conversations, right? Is that 10x the search volume? We're still trying to understand how they're quantifying that. But I think most importantly, what we're seeing is with the content, knowing that you have to provide content for all those different questions that the user might be asking. And sometimes you might have to be providing it in different ways, right? So we're really looking at how can we take a piece of content. This is a perfect example here on the 5 things, right? We sit down for an hour and we record one long session, but then guess what? We're cutting this up into different bits and pieces because there's a higher likelihood that when they're going through that multi-turn conversation, we're going to have a piece of material that specifically talks about that individual question, to where they might just have been searching that more broad, top level topic of conversation to get that Google search result. Then they're mining through the data within the actual article itself, right? So a big change for us is really creating the same types of content, high quality, right? User intent driven, search driven based on volume, but then looking at ways, how can we, take a blog and turn it into a video, turn it into a YouTube short, a IG reel, a TikTok as well, because those are all those signals that this multi-turn, which is having so much more volume of search run through it, it needs all those different data points to pull from, is what we're seeing. So kind of a very high level approach on how we're looking at optimizing some of these AI platforms.
Yeah, it's great to know. And I know for myself, like just as an example, I'm traveling for a year. Before I did that, I bought a new laptop, and the keyboard is a little bit quirky on this. I don't have the same button layout I did on my prior laptop. Okay, not the end of the world, but I was trying to figure out how to do something, and it wasn't obvious to me what buttons to push on the keyboard. It's just a different layout. I went to Chat GPT and I said, this is the computer I have, and this is what I'm trying to do. And it said, try pushing these buttons. And I said, well, that's not working. It said, okay, if that doesn't work, try this. I'm like, okay, that worked. They're like, great, glad I was able to help you. Now imagine, you know, I'm using a Samsung Galaxy Book. Samsung doesn't have those instructions on
Right.
their website. So what I would have to do is either play around with it, or you have to go to something like, like a Reddit message board, or go onto
Mm-hmm.
X and ask people, how do I do this? And then, you get 74 answers where people give you joking answers and they think they're really funny. And then eventually someone says, hey, try the thing that you would have done. I didn't even need to, I just typed the question in barely understandable English and got an answer.
Yeah, no, it's so interesting that you say that too, because that is a problem with, again, that finite search, right? Is okay, you might find something, but it's not specific to what it is you're looking for. And so that's where you hear about these inference models
Right.
causal models, Bayesian modeling as well, right? To where, okay, you have the ability of that AI to actually think through the specific problem that you have, right? And then that's where we're getting into even the agentic conversations of, okay, yes, it is instructed to have this workflow, but that workflow also can start to change based on certain causes and effects that it may be getting with, I think Google's conference name is so great, based on the inputs and based on the outputs, right? Where
Yeah.
these models actually start to change to provide you that personalized response, even though that material might not exist specifically to that use case anywhere else online. It's absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, well, you know what? We did that, but the next segment is on Klarna's credit losses. And I sent, intern Cash and Crow to go find long-term data on Klarna's credit losses because if you go to their website does like they've got 1/4 of financial information on their finance tab, right? The company didn't
Right.
go public. So I can't
Yeah.
go through SEC filings. And
Right.
so Cashin called me and he said, I don't know what to do. And so I'm on the phone with him. I said, give me a minute, just hold. And I again went to one of these AI models and I said, give me Klarna's credit losses every quarter as far back as you can. And guess what? I
Mm-hmm.
got several years of quarterly losses. And he said, how did you do that? How did you get it so fast? What prompt did you use? And you can copy the whole thing. I pressed the copy button and I just sent him the whole description, right? And so we're using this to get through research faster. And the truth is, there's no intellectual value to going and finding that data. The value is once you have the data to figuring out what to do with it. I knew what to do with the data.
That's right.
I was sending cash in to go get the data. Well, now it
Right.
it's even faster than calling one of the interns because you just type the question into a model and you get it. But I
Yep.
guarantee you it's exactly what you said, Rob. That information did not come from one document,
Right.
right? They crawled multiple documents. So you couldn't go to a place to find it. You would have had to go to many places.
Right.
In this case, it's like having 100 analysts. They go find it.
Yeah, it's amazing. I read something on Twitter X, I think it was. It said AI is not replacing marketers. AI is replacing marketers that don't use AI,
Right.
which I think
Exactly.
is a great way to put it in the
Yeah.
grand scheme of things. All right, great stuff there. Great conversation, Gary. We got two more things actually, so we're going 6 things for this week. We got one more to close out, and then we'll get to our educational section on secured and unsecured debt. Again, you're watching The Government Needs a New Credit Score issue. We'd love if you could subscribe to the channel if you found any value. If you haven't, give us a thumbs down and leave a comment. Gary loves those more than anything, so bring it on. Or head to deepknowledgeinvesting.com, IR at deepknowledgeinvesting.com. You can also use the Ask Gary feature to send in any questions that you might have for the show. And be sure to, again, grab that free subscription. That'll get you access to all of the posts that are going online on the Deep Knowledge Investing website.